Hello, everyone, and welcome back to We Live in Color, right here on Converge Media. Now, before we begin, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Converge Media and all the things that we, as a collective, have going on. You've already watched the first 2 episodes, and 3 is a charm. Our next guest is a friend, is a leader, is a community advocate, and a part of what we call our community compass. I am here and so grateful to have in our Black Media Matters studio, Jaelynn Scott.
It's good to be with you.
I love that you are here.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you're here. One, we are coordinating and we didn't do this on purpose. So that's the one, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But it's the legacy that you are creating in community, creating space as well as a call to action for liberation for all community members. Did you always start off as this community advocate?
I mean, it's tricky figuring out, I think, as a LGBTQ person, I came out, when I was coming of age, so this would have been the 90s, like 95 is when I graduated high school. I'm aging myself. But we didn't really, and I was in Mississippi, right? So coming out was a white thing, not necessarily something that we did, we weren't using the pride flag. We had our, stuff that we would go to in Atlanta and Dallas and New Orleans, but I think we had just started leaning into pride and understanding sort of our role within the larger LGBTQ advocacy world. I mean, a lot of Black community had always done some trans advocacy and HIV advocacy work, right? But really understanding ourselves in I would say, the ecosystem of LGBTQ social justice work was just not a thing at the time. But, I was coming out in Mississippi at 18 years old, and I'm, joining certain groups and starting to go to, I would say, protest and LGBTQ protests in ways that other Black folks in Mississippi weren't doing at the time.
Because it was hard.
Because it was hard
At stake,
and
right?
dangerous, right? And I think Black community, particularly in Mississippi, had associated queerness and LGBTQ-ness in the way that sort of social justice activists held it as a white thing, right? And we had our own pride, we had our own ways of being, but I had never really associated really myself in the advocacy world growing up. But over time, I started leaning more into it. We started doing more public-facing work. I always had other jobs, but was doing work on the side. But my real official advocacy work began probably, I would say, about 7 or 8 years ago.
That's amazing. And I just think about down south, living down south, and we live in Washington State, right? When we think about having an opportunity to be our whole selves, because my family's really church oriented down there. Is yours too?
Yeah, of course.
How was that? Were they protective of you going out there and advocating, or just being yourself? How did that look?
I mean, it was a struggle. I think to some extent, it's hard to talk about, I think in public spaces or with, mixed company, as we say, the Black community and its relationship to queer identity, right? Because I think there's a lot of stereotypes about how Black community is not accepting. I just think it's different. I mean, there's a certain level of acceptance and love that I always got in community, in church, with family. And you see, there was in my grandmother's church, this hardcore sanctified church, right? There's an organist with this long perm, that long nails and beautiful silk clothing and that, but was honored in the church as a musician, as a spiritual healer, but could not be open with it in their life. And so it was a different kind of configuration. I think the more that I start using the language of queerness and leaning into a little bit of transness, it got tricky, right? And I think that's when I started to get a lot more pushback. But as long as I was willing to do my stuff on the side and not embarrass the family, everything was okay, right? Yeah.
How did you affirm to yourself in that space, right? Because as you said, we LGBTQ-ness, right?
Right.
Which is a new word, right?
LGBT queerness. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
LGBTQ queerness. In our LGBTQ queerness, right, we see a narrative that's painted on TV of how we looked. And there really was no queer representation, Black queer representation of who we were, right? And then, and how accepting it may look on TV and how we had to affirm for ourselves. How did you keep your willpower with self-discovery, with living down south?
So I sought out, I think Elin Harris's novels came out around that time, right? Yeah.
If this world were mine?
And I think it was Invisible
Abide with Me?
Life, and yeah. So when all those novels started coming out, I was just seeking out like queer literature and people that was speaking openly as Black folk, right, about their queer identity, right, and about my experience as a Black LGBTQ person. And so, I learned, it was about that time I learned about Jimmy Baldwin, James Baldwin. I learned about, I learned of all of the folks who were Black and queer, who were important in our community, right? And that was the way that I affirmed myself, that although I felt completely isolated and as a unicorn, I was not alone, and I didn't and knowing that I had always been there, that we had always been there, and that we were pillars of the community.
You didn't have to go anywhere else but in our community.
That's it. We only had to go within our community for the affirmation, because I think when I saw affirmation from white community, and I went through phases, right? It felt like that I was, being pushed out from the Christian church, right? Because I was deeply religious myself too. I felt like I was being pushed out from family. I couldn't find my place. And so then I left, tried a little, took a little taste of the little white queer community, and realized that like I felt more alone in that space, and realizing that that was not the same kind of queerness that I was living myself. Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about living, and I also know your favorite color is lavender, but we'll get into that.
Okay, all right. Is it?
We're going to talk a little bit about lavender. We're going to talk more about community. I'm here with Jaelynn Scott. You're watching We Live in Color.
Looking for laughs? Looking for love? Fast Talking Figaro has got you covered. Toe-tapping melodies, lively staging, and colorful costumes. Don't miss The Barber of Seville, May 4th through 19th at McCaw Hall. Tickets at seattleopera.org. Ballet's greatest comedy, Coppelia, returns to Pacific Northwest Ballet. Perfect for all ages, Coppelia delights with dazzling dancing and magnificent music played by the PNB Orchestra. Seven performances only. Visit pnb.org for tickets.
Hello, welcome to Elite Insights with Carlos Himani. We're looking to offer an in-depth look at event production industry through the lens of client experiences and joint successes. The podcast will emphasize guest interviews, focusing on client, discussing their fields, and reflecting on their collaboration with Elite Collective. Again, you're with Elite Insights. Carlos Himani here. See you guys in a few.
The importance to share the history of the Buffalo Soldiers of Seattle and Buffalo Soldiers of everywhere, including cowboys and cowgirls of color everywhere, is really important because most likely they're forgotten. It's important that they're acknowledged, especially for girls like me who look up to them.
At a rodeo, it's got an impact on people when they see somebody doing something like that, especially a person of color, you know what I mean? It's got a big impact on people, I think.
Representing the Evergreen State, I am your Miss Teen Rodeo Washington, Jessa Thomas. Welcome to the Windswept Farm.
And we're back. You're watching We Live in Color, and I'm here with the amazing Jaelynn Scott. We were definitely laughing during the break, but in the meantime, I want to just continue to go on with your wonderful journey. And you talked, you were really into ministry, and what happened throughout the 2000s, early 2000s, to bring you like in leading in the areas of ministry?
So I went through, I think, through the course of self-acceptance, had some bumps in the road, right? And did a little bit of, substance use and struggled a lot. It was right after, I think, September 11, 2001, I was working as a flight attendant and was laid off. It was my first job that I loved. It felt like it was going to be a career. And it really was the first time that I had a sense of being out of my family's house and a little bit of independence, and it just sort of was ripped away immediately. And then landing in this community, trying to figure out, who am I in this space? Of course, in retrospect, I can say I was dealing with trans identity stuff. I sort of knew around 98, 99 that was a thing, but I couldn't figure out how to reconcile it. And I struggled, and I feel like my mind slipped some. And I went on this journey in meditation. I found Buddhism, and I started practicing Buddhism and started practicing meditation. And it really was mind training for me, like bringing my mind back to just grounding my mind and understanding what does it mean to be centered? What does it mean to be lost? What does it mean to have some control over my thoughts and some control over my attachments and some control over my desires? And it worked for me, right? It grounded me. I felt free and free of, I think some of the pain that I struggled with most of my life. And I remembered this calling that I had. My great grandmother used to call me little preacher, right? I've had preachers they do it with everybody black. They're just like, you gonna be preaching the ministry. You called to the ministry. But I really did grow up feeling that calling, right? And my grandmother's always affirmed that this was going to be a thing for me. And I think once I found my ground again in my spiritual center, I was like, ministry is where it is. So I went into, I think it was 2013, 2012, went into ministry school, Naropa University in Boulder, and spent a lot of time, multiple years in retreat and solitary retreat for months at a time, and et cetera, and wanted to share that out. And found the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I chose it because it was this perfect mix of faith and social justice. And I couldn't find that mix anywhere else, right? In terms of my home tradition, which was Buddhism. And in the Black church, right, there's always this mix of social justice and spirituality, but not with queerness and transness, necessarily. And so I attempted to do ministry there, and really, I did director of education. But I was really focused on how to, in a contemplative way, come to a level of consciousness around racial equity, racial justice, and trans and gender justice.
In doing that, over the years, and that was why you were here when you moved here.
That's eventually why I landed here, because I kept trying in multiple churches and they didn't like it. Okay. So I kept having to change churches.
Yeah. So changing and coming here, what was it like moving from Mississippi to Seattle?
Yeah.
Going from that place to this place, what was that like for you? I mean, I find us to be very much inclusive and progressive. Do you feel that we make great space for all community members?
I mean, I think you know the answer to this, but, I spend a little bit of time in Colorado and around other white progressives, so I sort of got it. I feel like Seattle is like the capital of white liberal progressiveness. It's like if NPR had a home city, it would be Seattle. It feels like it's just peak white progressive, and that comes with all of the downfalls and maybe some of the benefits too. I think the benefits are there's a relative amount of, I would say, maybe apparent safety. I have to worry when I go to the grocery store, right, about how I look. I have to make sure my hair looks right, that things are in place, that, I'm feeling okay, but it's not as challenging as it would be in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
I also, transitioned here, and I waited many, many years to transition, right? Probably 15 years after I realized it, but I felt like something about here, the trees, right, covering me, the rain shielding me, the cloudiness sort of being a protector for me, and maybe a little bit of the progressive environment being some feeling of safety. You know, in some ways I feel like white folks don't pay, like they either are hyper aware of us here in terms of fear, anxiety, or projection, or they completely ignore us. And I felt like I wasn't looked at as much, right? And so it provided that space for me, as well as abundant resources in healthcare. And so in that way, it is a shield. But in terms of feeling community and feeling warmth and feeling love from folk and feeling seen in my Blackness and who I am, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so it's this mixed bag of like terror, really, of, you know, the terror of white progressiveness, which is what they do to us and project onto us, but also this really alluring safety that's offered in their presence. It's just such a challenge, and I'm always feeling torn here.
And I feel like that is exactly, well, my next question going into the position that you hold right now as the executive director of Lavender Rights. Can you tell community a little bit more about Lavender Rights and what y'all all do?
Yeah, it's solid.
But it's, I feel like your organization gives that sense of all around safety and advocacy for all queer folks in our community. And I think that you answered the question of saying absolutely not, but I feel like Lavender Rights has that blueprint of the safety that we all need to be able to feel to progress in community. But tell us a little bit more.
I feel honored that you feel that way. Like I think when I came to Lavender Rights Project, it was because I was, you know, I was Black in an organization, and as well as other Black folk in the organization trying to do change work, and was pushed out of that org as well as others. And Lavender Rights Project was my representation, the attorneys there. And they saw my work and they were like, to their credit, they were like, this is beautiful work. Can you come here and do what you did at that org, right? And so I came and I was like, the first thing you need to do is live into your mission, which is figure out how to get like folks of color, particularly black trans femmes in leadership. And really, I think in a sort of selfish way, I was working with my therapist about feeling like I didn't really have community. And my therapist was like, well, why don't you just try to gather a group of folk? But of course, because of who I am, I was like, well, let me gather these people at my job and let's do this thing where we sort of transform this organization. So I brought in these community members in a selfish way. They were community leaders that I was just hoping to be in relationship around the dinner table with, right? In a very feminist way, just to be there with them. But what happened was transformative, right? They started having their own vision for the organization, and we started to, you know, hire them more full-time on staff. I took over as executive director. We changed the mission, the vision, and the entire organization changed. I think it is now, you know, if I'm thinking about it in the context of this conversation, it is the community or the hope for community that I want in the Pacific Northwest and that I wanted and needed in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it is black as blackity black, black, black in terms of how we operate with our mission and vision and how we are together. And we are in many ways still isolated from the rest of the LGBTQ Seattle community, and we have to make it work for ourselves, but we have figured out how to make it work for our community and for ourselves. And I think that our work is not only supporting folks like me, but it's also transforming the scene of LGBTQ advocacy in the state and hopefully at some point in the country.
Say in the country. I've seen some of the work in the community discussions that y'all have had nationally, and just super grateful for your team that has been able to bring that together for us. And
it's a powerful group of folks, and that's the thing. I think oftentimes we get into this sort of Messiah thing, like one person is a savior, but I am nothing without the people that are in that organization. And I think it's a lot of people that would not have gotten hired in a lot of places for the positions that they're in because people don't believe in us. And then I see it. We see the brilliance in each other, unlike the way that other people see us. And it's been proven. You bring them in and they are just solid. I mean, solid.
Everyone is shining.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit about what Lavender Rights has coming up, what you have coming up. Calls to action, We Live in Color tribute. When we come back, you're watching We Live in Color.
Here on Back to Besa, it's always been important to me that we uplift stories from across the region and that no matter where you live in the nation, you never have to miss a moment of the show as we continue to highlight the beauty, excellence, and resilience of our communities across the Pacific Northwest. Why? Because representation matters. So no matter where you live, be it the Central District or Centralia, Portland or Pullman, or anywhere across the country, I encourage you to join me on this Back to Besa journey by downloading the free Fox Local app on your phone or smart TV as we continue to elevate the very best in our communities.
Big Tobacco thinks they know everything. They think they know you, your community, the places you go, the way that you spend your time. They think they got you all figured out, down to a formula, a calculation based off of numbers of what they think they know. Show them they're wrong. Learn more at theythinktheyknowyou.org.
Looking for laughs? Looking for love? Fast Talking Figaro has got you covered. Toe-tapping melodies, lively staging, and colorful costumes. Don't miss The Barber of Seville, May 4th through 19th at McCall Hall. Tickets at seattleopera.org.
Africatown Plaza is our latest affordable housing development project. It's 126 units of affordable housing over community commercial space.
It's the first time in my career, and I've been doing this for 10 years, that I was able to design for people who look like me.
Africatown Plaza is a beacon of hope.
Africatown Plaza is a love letter to the community.
One in every 500 African Americans in the U.S. suffers from sickle cell disease. 1 in 3 African American blood donors is a match for patients with sickle cell. 1 appointment to donate blood with the American Red Cross can help save a life. Will you be that one? Visit redcrossblood.org/ourblood today to schedule an appointment at a location near you.
And we're back with We Live in Color, and I am sitting here with Jaelynn Scott, who I just don't want to go because I love just sitting here and just talking to you. But you know, through your journey, you have climbed every mountain and still climbing mountains and have climbed down mountains to help other people climb. But my question for this We Live in Color tribute is like, who has helped you live in color?
I mean, there are a number of people, and I think I was thinking about, you mentioned this question to me beforehand, and I really was thinking about this person, and forgive me because I don't know how they're manifesting right now, but their name at the time was James, and in drag, she was Jasmine, and she was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, right? Living fully, you know, got her hair permed and laid to the side, right? Wearing her heels and her boots and showing up how she wanted to show up in loud colors in Hattiesburg at University of Southern Mississippi, right? Full of these, you know, white conservative people, right? And a lot of black folks that didn't understand people from the country and et cetera, but lived without any shame and bias. And she was the first that was like, girl, why don't you like do your nails? Why don't you think about wearing this? Why don't you think about some shoes? And she helped me understand how there was safety in showing up really fully in myself. Because the hiding wasn't doing it. Like, I got harassed more than she got harassed. There was something about the boldness and pride with which she showed up that kept her secure. And it's not true for everyone, but it showed me that there was a different way to live life and not live in fear. And I think about her often. I reflect on her often, and I wish, you know, in some ways I have regret that I I didn't have the bravery that she had, but I had to make the choices that I made. But when I decided, you know, I'm doing this, she was the first person I thought of. And I was like, if she could do it, if she could live like that 20 years ago, I can live as my true self now.
And you are, and I think one of the things that you do is, I think that you embed that in other folks.
I hope so.
And you're empowering so many of us community members, all of us, and to be now in Capitol Hill with Lavender Rights. Not very many Black-led orgs are in Capitol Hill. I don't think that I've seen that representation of us there, and I've grown up here. So I'm hopeful and grateful that you are at the helm of that. So I do have to say that.
Don't have me too.
But I'm trying not to right now. So now what I'll say is, what else can we expect for Lavender Rights? What else can we expect from Lavender Rights? Girl.
Thank you. I adore you. I adore you, and I adore those words. We will continue fighting for guaranteed income and guaranteed income for trans people, particularly in the state of Washington and I believe elsewhere. There are a lot of anti-trans bills and legislation happening, and we're trying to respond where we can. But we think the most important thing that people can do right now is to be thinking about building our community and investing in opportunities like guaranteed income housing. We have a housing facility that will be opening up in Capitol Hill. We're hoping for more projects specifically thinking about all trans people, not just Black trans people, but all trans folks, because a lot of the housing supports that are available to us aren't necessarily safe. So leaning into supporting trans people and trans people of color with housing. And then also we'll just be continuing to fight with legal supports and fighting the good fight. And so pay attention to us on social media, lavenderrightsproject.org, on Instagram.
Hold on one second. Can you look in that camera and let them know what they got to do?
Yes, so visit us at lavenderrightsproject.org. Please see us on Instagram at Lavender Rights Project. Please make sure when we have calls to action, and we want you to write your senators, your legislators to sign up and join. The most important thing that you can do right now for trans folks and trans people of color is to realize that if you take care of Black trans women, you'll take care of our entire Black community.
Love you, my friend.
Love you too.
Thank you so much for coming to Black Media Matters Studio. And anything that Lavender Rights has going on, anything that you have going on, please feel free to reach out. This is community.
I'm honored to be here with you. I love you.
Love you.
Not just for the camera.
Not just for the camera. This is real. This is it's real. And thank you, community, for keeping it real. Thank you for tuning in. We Live in Color. We'll be back next week with our amazing guests. You will stay tuned. Remember to walk with love. You're watching We Live in Color, Converge Media. Have a good night. Hey everybody, Deaunte Damper. To learn more about our blog posts, community events, and more, go to whereweconverge.com.